Hi, and thank you for joining today for this special video revealing the land of Jesus. Straight is the gate. For the past year, I've been searching through evidence related to the North that aligns with the truth of scriptures and prophecy specifically. I have a number of playlists, and I encourage you may want to go and look through them. One of them is called Sides of the North, and I have another video that's called The River. So these videos really start to talk about the geographical, geological, historical, evidence that points to the location of what I would call the camp of the saints in the beloved city. And this is all aligning with scripture. So that's the purpose of my studies, and it always has been. I've also started a series called Surrounding the Camp. So I've done 4 videos in that series, and that really focuses on the buildup of evidence against Gog and Magog, who are the enemies of God and our Lord Jesus Christ. And so they're referenced in chapter 20 of Revelation. We read about the nations of Gog and Magog being deceived by Satan and surrounding the camp of the saints and the beloved city. So that's where we are right now in this series, and I will tag this into the Sides of the North series. However, this one is more groundbreaking than every one of them. It's really a chronological buildup of evidence that I've put together in all of those videos. So if you go through them, you can sort of go on the journey, if you will, with us. And a lot of people have taken this journey. So it really started on that verse in Psalms, which is the sides of the north, talks about beautiful for a situation. The joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion on the sides of the north, the city of the great king. And so seeking the city in this time of growing deception in which we live has been a real call on my heart. And I know it's been the call on the heart of many people that are also engaging in these conversations. And so one of the early, I guess, insights that I had was from Matthew 7:14. And it's where Jesus is speaking, and he says, "But straight is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it." And so it's interesting to me that the spelling of the word straight was not the same as what you would say is like a straight line. So a straight line would be Stright. But this word was actually being spelled as straight, which is actually more of a maritime reference to a passage of water between two bodies of land. And so it was very interesting to me, and I started to focus on the strait that is closest to the north in terms of like a direct line, and that's the Bering Strait, which is up between Alaska and Russia. And so I kind of started to be drawn to that area, even though, yes, there are a lot of straits in the world. That area in particular was interesting to me because it was right on the side of the north. And it even in Google, if you go look at that strait, it's described as a straight, narrow gateway to the north. So very interesting to me that they even describe it as a straight, narrow gate, even in Google Earth. So I'm not intending for this video to be too long, but I just wanted to give you a little background on what started the investigation. So I found much evidence in the region of China as well that pointed to Christianity. And so the evidence that Jesus and the saints had spent much time in the Asian region. And when we when we read like the travels of Paul, for example, in Mark, and the apostles that went to preach the gospel to the whole world, they ended up traveling along the coast of Asia. Now, if this is your first time here, I do not believe that the coast of Asia references the Mediterranean. I believe it references the coast of Asia, which is China and all along the eastern coast there. So yeah, I don't want this to be too long of a video, but we'll see how it goes. And I just want to let you know this is groundbreaking in the study of the little season. And when we're talking about Revelation 20, I'm talking about verses specifically 7 to 9. And what they say is, and when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sands of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city. And fire came down from God out of heaven, and devoured them. So we know that there is an adversary who is going to come against the saints and the beloved city. One thing I would say is that when we're talking about the little season, it comes specifically from those verses there. So it talks about Satan being loosed for a little season. And basically, when Jesus came and he fulfilled his word to destroy the temple and to, basically bring his kingdom, the good news of the kingdom was that Jesus was doing away with sin and death and the oppression that was, part of deception, which is what Satan was wielding against mankind forever, like since the beginning. And so I think this rebellion ceased for 1,000 years, and Jesus said it, I believe it, and it happened. And I also believe that Jesus is here, and I believe that the saints are also here. So I really want to delve in now. So in Isaiah 9:6-7, this is one of the most beautiful passages in Scripture that was the prophecy of Jesus and what he was going to do. And so it says, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. And his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end, upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth, even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this." Isaiah 9:6-7. So let's start looking at the evidence that has been brought to my attention, I believe, by the Holy Spirit. I was sitting at my desk, doing a bit of research, but I just put my head down and I said, "Lord Jesus, where are you?" I said, "Please show us where you are." And I say that a lot. I pray that a lot. And it was as if there was this delivery to the front of my mind, and it just came out of the back of my mind in a way. It was some kind of information that had been there already, and I'll walk you through that a little bit. But what I want to show you here is I had always felt very uncomfortable with the international date line, which is on the 180th longitude. And why would they break it like this? What is the function of changing time zones right in this area? So as I went through the study, I really decided to call it the International Gate Line because I believe it's being gate kept. I believe there's been a very big cover up, and I'll show you as we go through this. So I started to wonder why, what is the mechanism? What are the mathematical magic spells that they've cast here? And it's definitely what's happened. I've said before, this is very much a smoking gun. On the international scene, when we're talking about politics and international kind of the emergence of, let's say, tensions that they build through the press, it's just a visual thing. We don't know if it's actually happening or not. But they build a visual tension between certain countries. And one of the big ones is United States and Russia. And it always has been. And we can think of things like the Cold War, for example, being a time in our more recent history where many of us will remember things like the Berlin Wall being built or coming down. And some of these events that, in my mind, were kind of gates to the next level of the plan, if you will. So this area here in particular was always a smoking gun for me. I think it represents that this is not a hostile positioned for two countries to hold. even though, yes, that area is highly militarized, if they really wanted to go to war, the war would have happened in that area, but it didn't. The war never happened in that area, and I think that's also testament to the fact that this is a hidden piece of information that we have not been given. So this area here to me is a smoking gun. I think that the Gog Magog countries, nations, actually represent the East and the West. I think that that area in Northeast Asia that is directly sort of opposite on the map to Alaska is actually where Gog Magog were based. It's on a lot of the old maps. And then you have the United States actually purchasing that land directly across. Well, is it directly across is the question. But this to me is a very indicative position for us to look at and say there's something weird going on here. So when I started this study a couple of years ago, I came across a lady's video, and her name's Jane's Journey, and she did a very succinct, small video. I think it's about 3 to 4 minutes long, but it did get me thinking, and I did just kind of take a screenshot of one of the maps that she had put in there. So it's called the Jesus Map, her video, and she's just asking a few questions about what this means on the maps, and we'll go into that in a little bit. So thank you, Jane. I also, in my journeys through the maps, actually picked up a couple more little pieces, but I didn't know where to put them because actually I just put them in the back of my mind and kind of filed them away somewhere in my computer because I didn't really know what to do with them, because in my mind, the center north was the location that Jesus and the saints are. That was in my mind. So these two little pieces of land here just have this reference, land of Jesso. But recently in March, a friend of mine, Yanni, and I were speaking, and he shared with me some of the pictures that he had seen recently, more in the Pacific region. And these ones had to do with Japan, as well as the land of Mu that some people have referenced as well. And those are kind of more in the mid to South Pacific. And they were just kind of, but it got me thinking again about the Pacific. And I had just seen an article on the news that showed people finding like a brick yellow road under the ocean north of Hawaii. And I'll just zoom in on this. So that road is like made of yellow brick, and that's the name of the Marine National Monument where they found it in that area. I can't pronounce it, so I'm not going to try, but that, and then I joked that maybe the yellow brick road leads to the Emerald City. And if you take a line and you draw it directly up to the north, it goes directly through what we would call the Bering Strait. So there's no deviance, it's a straight line. So that all got me thinking, the international date line is a mystery, and I have not seen anyone fully answer why on one side of the date line at the Diomede Islands, at the most narrow point, allegedly, you have a 10 a.m. on a Saturday, but a 7 a.m. on a Sunday, which leaves a 3 hours of missing time. So in God's perfect world, there is no missing time. There's no gaps. Things move as they should. It is a perfect clock. So why the missing time here? This seemed manufactured to me. And it seemed that they were manufacturing it for some reason. And I couldn't really figure it out. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. So that's when I started praying, Lord, where are you? What is going on here? Well, what I did was I took the 3 hour missing time, and I thought, how many time zones? So the 3 time zones, how big is that? How much land would that be if you were to measure that? So I took just a snip across 3 time zones, and took that same snip and I just created a space. Well, isn't it funny that they actually use the word space for their, I would say, Babylonian assault on the heavens and on the Lord, just like Nimrod. So this word space is very interesting, but it also made me realize that they have entered empty space into this region here. Or let's say they've created space by removing something. And so that got me wondering, I wonder what would have gone in that space if they actually did remove something. Well, isn't it interesting, when I measured 3 time zones, it is approximately 1,000 miles. And that would be, in Canada, that would be about 3 states wide. 3 provinces wide. So that would be BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. And that is approximately 1,000 miles. Now, that's huge. If anyone's not aware, that's a very big space. So I went back to old maps and I thought to myself, this one has always really intrigued me, because this area, so I started to look at the Pacific region off the Asian coast. And I keep coming back to this map, which has Jesus clearly depicted out here in the water off the coast of Asia. And actually, I think this is Japan down here. So why would they just put Jesus there out in the water? And why would they be referencing Christians on their text underneath? This is definitely Jesus, because the spear that goes into his side is biblical reference to let us know that that is Jesus. And, memorably, the cross is what reminds us of Jesus and his death. So I started to look up here a little bit more, and I noticed, this familiar name called Anyan, and Fret means strait. So this is the Strait of Anyan. And I've seen that previously in a lot of maps. And this one actually says America on it. However, America is not that close to Asia, and yet everything else over here is proportionate. So how could this land here be called America? But, I had thought that before, but I didn't really take it any further. So I started looking up old maps, and I realized that the mapping system always positions us in the middle here between Europe, Africa, North America, and South America. And we're always looking at this middle bit. And I thought, that's interesting. If you look at the top here, the land of Greenland actually looks really big, and it looks like it's all connected across. So it looks like the land at the top goes all the way across. And I started to follow it across, and I said, hey, it actually comes down here. And terra means land. And I saw this land off the coast of North America. And that actually says Terra de Jesu. And it is right there in the middle of the Pacific. So that piqued my interest, because it looks like it's attached to all this land up here. So I decided to look at it more. And I caught this, which was really interesting. So if the 180 latitude, which is the international date line, comes down here, and we have the familiar names of the Asian Northeast locations on that side, then this is the strait that comes down next to Asia. But it actually says the Strait de Jesu. Strait de Jesu. However, This over here says the Strait of Anyan, which is the one we saw next to Alaska, which means Alaska is not next to the 180 degree, the 180 latitude. And there is something in between. There is land in between. So here we have the 180 international dateline, and we have the other strait over here, the Strait of Anyan. So what is this in the middle? What is this Greenland? Not Greenland, but what is this land outlined in green? So I went to another Asian map and I found land right next to Asia. And it's called Terra de Jesu. And when I type that into the Latin to English translation, it says the land of Jesus. Terra de Jesu, which is right off the coast of Asia in these maps. So I thought I need to find more maps, of course. So I went over here and I noticed this one is called the Strait of Anyan, and this land here is actually called Anyan, not America. So the closest thing I could find was Aonian, Aonia. There are documents on Anyan, by the way, but they mythologize it. So I'll go to those in a little bit. But initially I found this. And so it was belonging to Aonia, a region of ancient Boeotia containing the mountains of Halcyon, Helicon, and Catheron, sacred to the Muses or Aeonian maids. Aonia may have been a district of ancient Boeotia, a region of Greece. So we know that Greece is not where they say it is either. John Milton referred to Aonian Mount as in Paradise Lost. So Paradise Lost is I would say an occulting of the truth. But it does kind of reference that there was a lost land. Okay, so Paradise Lost and Aonian. So I started to look at maps that I've looked at before. And this map here from 1776 shows that what the chartographers did was they created this land that stuck way, way out from North America because they knew that in the old maps, there was land very close to North Asia. So they put the land way out into the water, but connected it to the Alaska land. And what happened was people started to reference that land to just being Alaska. And this is 1776, so that should give you an idea of maybe what was going on. Another map from 1776 shows a smattering of islands, and it also shows a very strange land geology in this region here. I do not believe that that represents Alaska, but I think it was moved further away so that they would actually start to think that this was actually Alaska. I think this is the land of Anyan, but they have actually confused things, and I'll show you why. Eventually, we started seeing this map, and this is from 1915. And what they did as well was they actually started to create natural reserves, so bird reserves and military outposts, and they circled all these islands like you can't go there, you can't go there, you can't go there. And it is my view that these are not actually islands. I believe there's land out there, or there was land out there, and I think it's still there. So what really got me started on this was I was looking at Greenland because I was trying to work on my surrounding of the camp videos, and I wanted to see a little bit more of the old depictions of Greenland. Well, what happened was I noticed that, again, it looked like it was all connected here at the top. So the connection of the land made me wonder, well, how far does this go? And sure enough, there is a large component of land right between North America and Asia, and it is called Terra de Yesu. Yesu, the land of Jesus. And that one was from 1757. So I decided to go back to older maps, and sure enough, as I looked at them, the Terra de Yeso was very close to China. You can even see the wall of China going there. And you can see Tartary and Cathay. So the Terra de Yesu was very, very close to Asia. And I'll show you here again. Terra de Yeso is the land of Jesus. And this map here, 1702, really, really demonstrates what I'm talking about. You have a strait on this side and a strait on this side. This side here is North America, and it used to, even on the Mercator map, all the way up to the top, it's called California. And this land in the middle is called Terra de Yeso. And this here is called the Mer de Yeso, the Sea of Jesus. So we have one strait on that side, and we have one strait on that side. Strait is the gate, and they have deleted what was in the middle by removing the time zones. So this depiction shows that there is no known existence of anything in that region. If you are a person on the east coast of Asia and you look across and you see land, you will think you're seeing Alaska. If you are a person in Alaska looking across and you see land, you will think you're seeing Russia. They have deleted this from anyone's knowledge below a certain, I guess, security pass. So one of the other things that they did is I noticed on the old maps, everything counts upward all the way around. So you'd have 180, 185, and they go up by fives. However, in the new version of the spherical Earth, they actually remove that and they stop everything at 180, and then they count backwards to the opposite meridian, which is in Greenwich. So therefore, they've completely canceled out any problem of people wondering what happened to these longitudes. I found this map as well. So this is called the Sea of Kamchatka. And yes, again, I noticed down here, we have the Terra de Yeso. And they never finished, drawing where the land is, but it's showing there. So Terra de Yeso, land of Jesus. And when I went up here to see what was on here, I noticed this. It says Camp de Jesu with a G. And when I type that in to the Latin translator, it says Camp of Jesus. is that camp of Jesus. Another map here shows that the international date line goes down the middle here, and they're calling this now the Strait of Anian. On the other map, it was over here. So they're confusing, where is the Strait of Anian? Well, we see a strait there, and we see a strait here, but we still have this problematic land in between. And something that I just found interesting was the red and white line that they've used to start canceling the time, start removing and deleting the time, because we know that barbers cut off excess, and we know that the North Pole has been attributed to Tricky Nick, right? Satan Claus. And you can also have candy canes with the same colors on them. It's a trick they play, and they get everyone to participate because that's how we consent to that tricky story being played on us. So this one is from 1683. This map here from 1666 actually shows a even better, I would say, depiction of the North. So the Greenland being attached all the way across to this area here, which also says Terra de Jesu. And it actually shows three, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines across. So the Strait of Anian is showing there, and then the other strait showing on the other side, and that looks like a large peninsula down there. So it would make sense why they cannot traverse the north. If this is land all the way at the top, this would make sense why they cannot traverse the north. So here is another depiction again, and this one is kind of done from overview of all the lands. And it's very clear here in orange that Greenland is connected all the way across the north to, and it says land of Arkti, and down here, Terra de Jesu, the Mer de Jesu, that's the Sea of Jesus. And I think, this going through here is a kind of Arctic passageway. Septentrional. And yeah, so it's all connected at the north. And this is very interesting when we start talking about Gog and Magog, because they are going to come up out of the 4 quarters of the earth, and they are going to march across the plateau or the great plain of the earth, the broad plain, and they are going to surround the camp of the saints and the beloved city. So why does anyone think that they would have hidden this land? And why, if it's connected to Greenland, are the military so interested in Greenland, protecting, as they say, Greenland, owning Greenland? Why in the World War II were the Axis so interested in the Thule Society or the Thule Society? There is an actual German government center in Greenland, and there's evidence to say that I think the Gog and Magog forces are actually gathering on the other side of the north, and they are going to culminate their attack They're going to gather their attack from this area here, and they will come towards the camp of the saints in the beloved city. And what's interesting as well is that in Psalms, it talks about and this is the name of my playlist actually, the sides of the north. So the sides of the north is where the city of the great king is. Beautiful for situation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion on the sides of the north, the city of the great king. So a lady that I talked to sent me this very, very interesting piece of connection information. And I just want to read it to you. So when we're talking about Anyan and Kivira as being noted on the maps in that kind of most western location of North America, it says here, the Strait of Anyan is 15 leagues and can easily be freed in a tide of 6 hours, and those tides are very rapid. He commented in 1588 letter to Philip II of Spain. Several decades later, Ben Israel commented that among the miracles the blessed be he did with the 10 tribes, he also created this strait, known as the Strait of Anyan, so they can remain separated and hidden from the nations. And I will ask my friend if she can give me the link to that. I have a number of documents that talk about the Strait of Anyan, but I would like to find that actual document. Something else I noticed is the 60th parallel is very important because it demarks the Arctic Circle, shall we say. And what's really interesting is that in darts, and I think this goes for a lot of sports, the highest score is actually right there. It's 60, and it's at the double treble, I think 20 treble or something like that. So that position right there in relation to, let's say, the center is, I would just say it's interesting that that is the highest mark if you get your dart there. So something else I wanted to talk about was I've been covering the coastal cataclysms in my series as well. So I have a series called Coastal Cataclysms. And one thing I suspect actually did happen at the end of the millennial reign was there was cataclysm, and I think that was like related to the loosing of Satan, but also a covering, maybe a veil of some kind going over the camp of the saints, over the beloved city. And what I would say is that, let's look at this map a little bit. So this map here is the post-war New World map, and this is from 1942, I think. And all the blue is kind of the regions that are protected or militarily assigned to the United States. And you'll see here that Greenland and Canada are there in blue. Okay, so this is called, all across it, the United States of America. And they talk about USA peace and security outposts, so all of these islands sort of around the Atlantic Ocean. And then even much more as you go into the Pacific Ocean, there's a lot of, let's say protectorate going on. And then all the way down to South America. And if we look over here, the extension of the United States military peace and security goes all the way over to Japan and even the Philippines and even a little island over here, right by China. And something that I noticed as well was that Japan was completely quarantined after the war. And if you look at the history of Japan and the, I would say, Christian influence that was taking place there, my friend Jana revealed to me that she found out that the Japanese had expelled the Jesuits from Japan, and they even had a no entry law or policy, you couldn't go into Japan. So this quarantine indicates to me that something very, very important happened there and or was known there. Not to mention that we know that as a part of the World War II events, we know that there was a severe attack on Japan specifically. And of course, they had to give us a narrative that made Japan look like they deserved it, right? So, yeah, so we can see around all through the Bering Sea area, there's this region that is militarily assigned to the United States. Now, that's not the only thing I went to see here, because when I started reading the bottom of here, I'm not going to read it all. I can link to this map, but I wanted to just read something from this number 2 section here underneath where it says our policy shall be this. And this is an absolutely fascinating read. They even call it a new world moral order for permanent peace and freedom. Well, we know that the freedom cult, liberty cult, believes that Lucifer gave them true liberty, and that is to do what thou wilt. So when you read it through the lens of the liberty cult, this is what they were kind of writing their policies under the basis of. Now, the old world, I'm reading number 2 here. The old world order of colonial oppression, exploitation of dominions, rival imperialisms, and mercenary balance of power diplomacy, of majesties, dictators, privileged minorities, plutocratic monopolists, and similar social parasites. The corrupted order responsible for the present world cataclysm, that's the key word I'm going to look for here, endangered our national safety and peaceful progress and shall never rise again. And they refer to cataclysm in other parts of this as well. So it is my belief that at the end of the millennial reign, there was a cataclysm. And I think it was, as all things are, I think God allowed something to happen that would protect, the people of God that were living in the holy city and in the land and the camp of the saints. So I think that's why the cataclysm happened. And I've covered this extensively in my Coastal Cataclysm series. So please go check that out. There's a lot of evidence here on the West Coast, which is the Pacific West Coast, to show that there has been damage. And one thing I would say is that on older maps, and this is personal, but these islands did not exist on the older maps. And I think part of the cataclysm really was to do with like the breaking of land off and the change of the coastline there. And there's also submerged mountains and things like that under the water there. And there's, I've done a lot of looking into major geological events across, that Pacific region. And there's a lot. So I can probably cover that in another video, but I wanted to get this one kind of covered first. Just some evidence that we have here on the West Coast. There's 2 in this picture, actually. So a lot of trees with the roots fully intact, driftwood all over, not logging driftwood. You don't log with the full roots attached. So these huge trees, and they're all over the beaches. They have full root systems, there's no way that could be, there's no way that could be actual logging wood. And then you often get these, what look like broken up islands off the other islands and off the West Coast. They're literally chopped off. There's trees growing on them, but there's, broken. They look broken off of another piece of land. Something else that has been going on over the years is the DEW radar, the direct early warning, I think it is called. And that's basically like a fence that goes all the way across North America, Alaska, all the way through Canada to the other side of Canada. Labrador, I think, is where it ends. So I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But something that I have talked about previously, and something that I was getting into a little bit more in the Surrounding of the Camp series, is that we know that these are all connected. We know that the Camp of the Saints, Gog Magog, warfare, and the enemies of God are all connected. I would say Arctic warfare is on the rise. There's a lot of evidence coming out to show that this is being funded and promoted regularly, and with an increasing urgency. If you listen to the Donald Trump, and the leaders of the world are constantly focusing on the Arctic. Along with those military strategies, you hear of things like AI, Space Force, SpaceX, and we know that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are actually working together very, very closely. One of them has a US Space Force, the other one has SpaceX. And I would say that what's running them all is the Gog Magog agenda. So we have the Order Ab Chao, which is order out of chaos, but actually I would call them the Orders of Chaos. That is actually the name of the 5th video in my Sides of the North series, which covers this a little bit. And, they play a duality game. So they do one thing over here to get you to look over there, but while you're looking over there, they're doing something over here. So there's lots of levels of duality within the progress, within that program of the Gog Magog deception and what they're actually planning to do. These are what I would call the Orders of Chaos, or at least some of them. And, you might be familiar with things like the Knights Templar, or the Most Noble Order of the Garter. And we have other ones called the Most Distinguished Order of St. Michael and St. George, or we have the Ordo Templi Orientis. All of these are actually indicative of what I would call the orders of Gog and Magog. These are the orders that have been drawing people into the network that is, in many layers, I would say, deceiving the world, turning people from the truth, turning people from knowledge of Jesus Christ and the kingdom that he brought and established on earth. And they have turned it into their own kingdom, and they serve their own master, Satan. And this all rose from the cult, the Pythagorean cult that worshiped the celestials. This would be, hailing back to the Babel and the Babylonians and the mystery religions that included the Egyptians. And, they really worshiped these false gods or fallen ones that rebelled against the Most High. And, they were given, for a time, the power in this world. But Jesus came to unseat them and to strip them of that authority, to strip them of their right to do these things. And when Satan was bound in the bottomless pit for 1,000 years, the kingdom of Jesus Christ was established on earth. And, there was no doubt about who was in charge, and there was no room for any of this cult worship. So I want to go over now and just look at some documents here. So this one is actually called The Maps of Gulliver's Travels. And here on page 12, I found a reference to Yesso. So the coast of Yesso, as it appeared on these maps, probably gave Swift a hint for his location of Brobdingnag, whatever that is. Discussing the size of this land, Gulliver concludes that our geographers of Europe are in great error by supposing nothing but sea between Japan and California, for it was ever my opinion that there must be a balance of earth to counterpose the great continent of Tartary. After his involuntary departure from the south coast of Brobdingnag, Gulliver is picked up in the vicinity of 44 degrees north of the longitude 143. And I think this is significant because you'll notice when you start looking for this information, it is just full of hit pieces. Things are relegated to myth. There's a lot of washing away of truth and replacing with the new information, this kind of versioning out of knowledge that was there before, and they have to start trying to account for it as they provide the new, more updated information that will match the maps that they have now given you. And here in this document, it really just talks about, the spelling of the name Jesus, which we've seen all through this study. And so just to point out here that the name Jesus is actually quoted throughout history and, appears in the original text of the New Testament. And so they're just talking about it here, but this is mostly a hit piece, I would say. And then the spelling of Jesus in Latin from the New Testament. So that was just another document that I found. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to read something from 2nd Esdras 13, because I think this describes the age that we're living in right now, sort of the end of this and what it might involve. So let me read this. 2nd Esdras chapter 13. After 7 days, I had a dream during the night. I looked and saw a wind rising from the sea and stirring up all its waves. As I watched, this wind made something like the figure of a man come up out of the heart of the sea. That man was flying among the clouds of heaven. Wherever he turned his face to look, everything that fell under his gaze trembled. Whatever an utterance came from his mouth, all who heard his voice melted, as wax melts when it feels the fire. I won't read all of this, but I encourage you to go read 2nd Esdras 13. I'll read a little bit more. Verse 12, after these things, I saw the same man coming down from the mountain and calling to himself another crowd, a peaceful one. Many people came to him. Some were rejoicing and some were sad. Some were even tied up, while some were bringing other people as offering. And so he asks the Lord what it means, and he answered me, I will tell you the interpretation of the dream as well, and I will explain to you the things you spoke about. As to what you said about those who are left, this is the interpretation. He who brings the danger at that time will himself guard those who fall into danger, who have works and faith in the most mighty one. Know therefore that those who are left enjoy greater privilege than those who have died. The interpretations of the vision are as follows. In that you saw a man going up from the heart of the sea. That is the one whom the Most High has been keeping for many ages. He will liberate God's creation all by himself, and he will put in order those who are left. And then in verse 29, look, the days are coming when the Most High will begin to rescue those who are on the earth. Those who live on earth will go out of their minds. They will plan to wage war against each other, city against city, place against place, nation against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. When these things happen and the signs that I showed you before take place, then my Son will be revealed, whom you saw as a man rising up. When all the nations hear his voice, then each one will leave its own region, and will leave off the wars they were waging against one another. An innumerable mob will be gathered together, as you saw, wanting to come and fight against him, but he will take his stand on the summit of Mount Zion. Zion will come and will appear to all, built and ready, as you saw a mountain carved without hands. My Son himself will indict the assembled nations for their impious deeds. These things were indicated by the storm. He will scold them for their evil plans and reveal the torments with which they are about to be tortured. These things correspond to the flame. He will destroy them without effort by the law, which is indicated by the fire. And it goes on, but I'm going to go down to verse 49. Then when he begins to destroy the multitude of the nations that are gathered, he will protect the people who have survived. Then he will show them many more signs. I said, Supreme Lord, show me why I saw a man rising up from the heart of the sea. He said to me, just as no one can seek out or know what is in the depth of the sea, so no one on earth can see my Son or those who are with him, except in that time when his day has come. This is the interpretation of the dream that you saw, which has enlightened you alone of all people. You have abandoned your own affairs and occupied yourself with mine, and you have sought my law. You have given your life to wisdom and have called understanding your mother. Because of this, I have shown you these things, for you have reward with the Most High. After 3 days, I will tell you more and explain to you weighty and wonderful things. So that's 2nd Esdras 13. And I would say that could be describing the end of this little season and the end of Gog and Magog. So I'm going to go now and just show you what's going on in the region of Alaska on the, obviously, east side of the Bering Sea. And I bet you didn't know that there is actually a NASA spaceport in Alaska right next to the Bering Sea. And it's called Kodiak Island. And so it says here that Kodiak Island provides responsive, flexible, and low-cost access to space for small and light lift rockets and stratospheric balloons. It has been launching rockets since 1998 and was the first FAA-licensed spaceport not to co-locate on a federal range. And here is the location, and they have these launching pads on this island. So downrange launching pads, this is where the excitement happens. 6 launch pads support solid, liquid, and hybrid suborbital light lift and small lift launch vehicles. And instrumentation field, there's just a lot going on here. Here you have launch pads 1 and 2. So 174-foot tall launch tower of LP1 in the nearby facility support all indoor climate-controlled launch vehicle integration. And they use, naming conventions, Minotaur, Athena. So these are very much occultists. And just to show you where that is, Kodiak Island, so the Bering Sea, it is my suspicion that this range of islands that circle here look very much to me like what we saw on the map where I showed the land of Yesu. That could be kind of the lowest point of that land. However, if you go and look, people do fly to these islands and they have aerial footage of it. But I don't see a lot of footage from the inside of this area. So I think it's possible that if there was a cataclysm and there's a veil over it, it's possible that it's just not visible right now yet. So let's take the grid lines off there. And yeah, so that is Kodiak Island right there. And it is within firing distance for their rockets in the region of the Bering Sea. I always wondered why it was positioned there, because I thought, well, if the north is where everything's happening, how does that help if it's way down there? Because that's a very big distance from there to the actual north of Alaska. However, if we have missing land in the middle here because they've just deleted it off of the spherical Earth model that they use, then it makes sense that it's actually very close to that region. So the spelling of Jesus, I think I've actually gone through this already. Yeah. So speaking of the Anyan, so the name Anyan, these are mostly hit pieces, as I say. This one calls it a myth. Even though I believe on the oldest maps, it shows it as a literal, real place. And it talks about it, as I read before, as a area that was going to keep the tribes hidden and living in peace. So at this point, the Northwest Passage was simply an idea. This is how they talk about it. And the name Anyan was associated with the western terminus of the passage, or the lands adjacent to it, wherever or whatever they were. So you can see how they start kind of creating a myth here, just in the minds of people reading. And so the existence of Anyan was important chiefly to those who, at least in their imagination, traveled west from Europe to the Americas and beyond. So they start really kind of mocking it in a way. Um, but it says here that the Northwest Passage, and hence the reality of Anion, had already been offered, and he proceeded to demonstrate by authority, by reason, by experience, and by circumstances, one chapter on each type of demonstration, that Anion was at the very least highly probable. So the land of Anion. And here it says the map provides considerable detail and irregular coastline, rivers, mountains, towns. It would have seemed foolish to the 16th century, in the 16th century, not to accept the map as accurate. And Anion stands out vivid and convincing. And then it calls it the northernmost location on the Pacific coast of North America, which we can see clearly it wasn't. And then Ortelius, in his world map of 1590, as cited earlier, shows Anion as a northern kingdom and Quivira as southern kingdom on a westward bulge on North America that extends 30 degrees north and south. Again, they start by 1915, they start talking about the mythical Straits of Anion. Why the need to do that if something just literally exists or doesn't? You don't need to make a myth of things. But these are just largely for that reason. And some of the questions I had, so that I looked into these a little bit, was, can you physically see Russia from Alaska? Well, interestingly, the two countries don't always see eye to eye, despite their proximity, much like neighbors in a subdivision. And then there is a video on this page here, which I've reviewed. It's fairly long, but I'll just give you a summary. So it's talking to the indigenous people that live there, who are really lovely. I think they're very nice people. They're not allowed to go past the Diomedes Islands because the military are on the other side. So obviously the Russian military keep anybody from going past a certain point from Alaska. The fellow who's actually doing this little coverage of this area, he says, oh, I'm going to go film Russia on my phone. But as he's going up the hill, he says, actually, my battery's dying. And then he looks across and it's a kind of a misty day. So you can't really see over there anyway. And there's nothing conclusive about that video at all. It sort of creates more questions for me than it answered. And why can't you take a boat from Alaska to Russia? It's not safe. So rather than saying, oh no, you can't do that, it gives you lots of reasons why actually you wouldn't want to do that. And here's another hit piece. So these are all intended to deter you from realizing that they're actually hiding something there. And so this person, Carl Bushby, walking around the world, so talks about this expedition that he's on. And then he says here, what makes this journey especially unique is Carl is not using boats or planes to get across the aquatic portions. Instead, he walks over the sea ice and the Bering Strait to reach Asia from North America. And he will also negotiate the gap across the English Channel by foot. Carl is not related to Jesus, which I just think is really interesting that they talk about the Bering Strait and then they kind of give a little nod and a wink to Jesus in that picture there. So when he tries eventually to go across the Bering Strait, look at what a mess he got in. It says here, so he and this other man together planned the formidable challenge of crossing the Bering Strait. Nobody in history had ever walked across the Bering Strait from Alaska to Siberia, even though in our minds that's logically ridiculous. So despite several attempts, and there is only one case of a journey in the reverse direction. Wow. So walking Alaska to Siberia and only one ever case of somebody walking the other direction. This is very odd considering people have swam across the English Channel. I mean, there's people that have, traversed Mount Everest, and yet this little supposedly tiny piece of area has not been traversed. I mean, give me a break. And there's only one case of a journey. So a Russian father and his son made it across to Alaska on the sea ice, a journey that almost took their lives. And as you go further down, it gives you even more reason not to try it. So here we go. It says the Russian authorities were not interested when they finally allegedly got there in their historic first, and instead were disgruntled that a couple of foreigners had strolled in from America. Carl and Dmitry were deported. Well, don't try that, okay? So, just going back to Kodiak Island, Kodiak Spaceport relies on more than rocket launches to generate revenue. So, you can see here, this is the kind of thing, this is a warhead, okay? This is not going to space. Let's be clear. In my view, these are actually warheads, and we've seen where Kodiak Island is. So, I won't read all of this, but basically it just talks about what they do at Kodiak Island and what kind of rocket launches they do. Weird place to launch rockets. So, going back to the distant early warning line, this was established as a response in the Cold War, allegedly. I always say allegedly because we don't know actually what we can trust from history, but what we know. And so it's the Mid-Canada line, which spanned the width of Canada at the 55th parallel and the U.S. Navy's Atlantic and Pacific barrier, as well as air and sea patrols and radar stations in Iceland, Great Britain, Faroe Islands, in the North Atlantic, and Greenland. So it really does surround that northern region. And here it actually says the first phase of the DEW line became operational on July 31st, 1957, and the line was expanded to encapsulate the Aleutian Islands and Greenland by 1961. Well, the Aleutian Islands are these ones down here, this line that goes all the way around, and this is called the Pacific Rim. So it goes all the way around the Bering Sea here. And they tell us that the reason for it was effectively to deter Soviet aggression during the Cold War. And then we have other organizations that I've talked about previously, like NORAD and all the rest of that. And then you might think, well, can you actually, what is this picture that they say is Russia? The photo was featured in 2018 BBC article with the title American Lone Sailor Held in Far East Russia near Alaska, and an article from the Russian press with the credit sort of translates to this name, and it was captured by a Russian photographer. So they're saying basically it's a real picture, but it doesn't show Russian territory visible from Alaska. And I've read other accounts to say that because of the curvature of the Earth and all these other reasons why you can't see Russia from Alaska. Very odd. Now, one other thing I wanted to talk about was the name Pacific. So the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. So the word Pacific refers to people, actions, and ideas that are peaceful. Pacific actions promote and create peace. A pacifist is a person who opposes all wars, and that word can help you remember that Pacific things are also peaceful. All Pacific things are done in a peaceful way or help the cause of peace. So who is our Prince of Peace? Jesus. And where does it show that the land of Jesus was? In the Pacific Ocean. Okay. And we just found out that they approved a shipping route in the Bering Strait. So it says here, so these things have to be handled very meticulously because of what they're hiding there. So the International Maritime Organization, an arm of the United Nations, think about that. This is the Bering Strait. So this organization that is an arm of the United Nations accepted routes proposed by the United States and Russia. So now they're working together, United States and Russia, for safe navigation in the waters between Alaska and Russia. The action designated routes for northbound and southbound traffic on both sides of the Russian Diomede Islands within the Bering Strait, a choke point, which is about 80 kilometers wide. They always change the distance of that as well, like it's always something different between the northern Bering Sea and the Chukchi Sea. So there's a very controlled and measured and United Nations, I guess, advocated um, plan and, purpose for how you're supposed to actually go in there and get through. 6 areas of precaution are noted. So the Maritime Organization also designated 3 areas to be avoided around Alaska's Nunavut, King, and St. Lawrence Islands. Well, if we think there's actually land in there and there's 3 time zones worth of land in there, it does make a lot of sense that they have to navigate it. So this is a big step forward as the U.S. Coast Guard continues to work together with international, interagency, and maritime stakeholders to make our waterways safer. And then the routes take effect on December 1st. Their use is voluntary, but they ensure mariners that they can transit in deep water without natural obstructions. What would those natural obstructions be? And then they say here that safe shipping measures, they say there are few resources north or south of the Bering Strait to respond to a spill. Oh no, there might be a spill, so this could cause serious damage. And so they have to start, really making cases against doing that and allowing people into the region, right? So these measures will keep vessels on their safest course and reduce the risk of them running aground, colliding, or interfering directly with subsistence hunting. And that's just another component. I won't talk about that too much, but the land belongs to certain people groups in that region, and therefore you're not allowed to go there if you don't belong to one of those people groups. And as long as those people groups can be educated into who they are and what that region, the history of that region, as long as they can be educated, then they are the ones that are going to keep that land from being accessed, in my view. So the eastern Bering Sea along Alaska's coast is biologically productive in part because its shallow average depths in the eastern Bering range from 6 to 75 meters. The Coast Guard plotted lanes, so now you have to go in certain lanes to ensure ships of water depths of at least 18.3 meters. And again, they talk about oil spills and things like that. So we don't want to endanger anything. Let's just stay in the right lane. Just keep traveling down this little line that you should stay in. Don't diverge from that because it could be very dangerous for everybody. And then, do airplanes fly directly across or over the Pacific Ocean? Flying directly across the Pacific Ocean requires a significant amount of fuel. However, curved routes are often preferred as they can be shorter due to the Earth's spherical shape. Well, let's say the Earth's not spherical, like I don't believe it is. Let's say the Earth is a flat plane and you're not making a curved shape. You're actually going across a different area than what you think you are. Inclement weather and winds may also impact your route selection, affecting fuel efficiency and cost. So safety, fuel efficiency, they give you lots of reasons to avoid that area, don't they? And then if you're to fly, say, from North America across the South Pacific, that's okay. You can go ahead and do that. That should be fine. Because now you're not actually flying across that region that they've hidden, that they don't want you to see. So crossing the Bering Strait, despite the fact that a ferry could potentially cross from the USA to Siberia in 2 hours, I don't know why they say it would take that long, because it's so close, allegedly. Political hurdles restrict traffic across the body of water. It is virtually impossible for a Westerner to receive permission to arrive on the Russian shores of the Bering Strait. Think about that. Don't even try it. It won't work. You will not be able to. It's virtually impossible. So I hope I've made the case today to show you that there has been a massive cover-up in the region of the Bering Sea. 3 time zones worth of land has been erased from our awareness. There has been a consecutive effort to militarize the areas surrounding that region. And we know from the historical evidence provided, the translation of this land, that the Terra de Jesu is the land of Jesus. And we've even seen on one of the maps, it's referred to as the camp of Jesus. Is that the camp of the saints? Is that where the beloved city is? We've also seen that Greenland attaches across the middle of the plain. so across the broad plain to the land of Jesus. We know that there is a building military effort in the region of Greenland. We know that there are 4 quarters in the very center at the north. And we know that there's BlackRock there as well. And I do have suspicion that BlackRock is actually the program or the money that is funding the Gog Magog um, emergence, and that the plan for them to go against the Camp of the Saints, to compass the Camp of the Saints in the beloved city, is being funded by all of these nations that have been deceived, and that those, the sands of the sea, the nations as the sand of the sea, are going to come up over the broad plain of the earth from the 4 quarters of the earth, and they are going to make war against the Camp of the Saints and Jesus. And that the Lord will, we read in Esdras 13, 2nd Esdras 13, that the Lord will protect his own, and that he has a plan, and ultimately it is the sovereignty of God that determines what's happening. It is not the enemy that's determining what's happening, it's the Lord. He is sovereign. Our days are in his hand. Our lives are in his hand, whether we decide to do one thing or another. We do have free will. We have the free will to study according to Scripture, what God wants us to know. We have free will to believe that Jesus said what he was going to do when he said he was coming to judge the earth, and we can believe that he set up his kingdom. We have the free will to believe that. Or we can believe the common narrative in the church of today that will tell you that, oh no, Jesus is coming sometime in the future, and we just have to be ready for that. You could also fall into the deceptions that are being perpetuated by the Theosophist Society. For example, the Theosophists have designed a program, a false Christ emergence, and that is to be taking place allegedly 2025, 2026. We know it's the 250th year anniversary of the United States of America, which was actually designed to bring in the New World Order. We have the Liberty Cult running the world. These people align themselves as Gog and Magog under their father, the devil, and they do his bidding because he gives them all of the power and the wealth and the influence on the earth during this little season. And that is what they're after, So I want to encourage you. And the last thing I want to say is that this information about the land of Jesus is actually the nail in the coffin for futurist dispensationalism and preterism. Because if the land of Jesus exists and he rules and reigns there with his saints and the people that are living in peace, then we know that it's not a future state, and we know that it's not symbolic like the preterists would like to say. It is a literal state of the kingdom of Jesus Christ on earth. And I would like to say, I'd just like to draw a line under that. I think obviously there's more research to be done. Go do some yourself. I think this is a very, very worthwhile study. The last thing I want to say is that I alluded to an announcement that's coming, and there will be an announcement coming of how we can all be involved. I'm going to be announcing at some point soon. A group of us have come together, and we have created a not-for-profit organization. There are no people being paid, but we will be funding research into the regions of the north and around this particular study, the various aspects of what we can do. And we're also going to, I would like to call people to be involved in, contributing to research. Do your own research and submit what you're doing, what you're finding, and we can build up our own library of information so that it's not one person, just broadcasting it. It's actually groups of people all over the earth. That would be awesome, wouldn't it? So that's The goal, we do have a lot already in place, but we're going to be announcing that soon. The website should be done soon. There's a lot of people working very hard. We all have regular lives. We have jobs, we have families, we have other responsibilities that we're taking care of in our lives. So please be patient. Something is coming soon. So I just wanted to give you that as well. But let's pray through this time that the Lord gives us insight, understanding, wisdom, and discernment. And I would also add to that sobriety. You know, as much as this time brings us together and we're enjoying, meeting people of the same mind, and there's more people every day coming to this knowledge, I would say just remember the fear of the Lord. Let's not, bring the worldly ways with us. My real, I have fear of the Lord. I read the word, and I actually am so humbled and so honored to be in a position to be able to share these things with you, but that the Lord is showing me these things. It's very humbling. I don't look for this position. It's not something that I ever wanted, but I'm blessed to do it, and I am blessed to serve the Lord in this way. And so I would just say, in whatever you're doing, be sober before the Lord. This isn't some kind of joke. We're not doing this as some kind of fun pastime. Um, be serious about this. I think it's really important to just have a sense of fear of the Lord as we do this. But on that note, I want to encourage you. The Lord is here. Jesus is here. The saints are here. We have probably a limited time ahead of us until we know more about what's going on, but just seek the Lord. Pray and find His will for what you should do. I know collectively that's kind of what we're doing already. So I want to encourage you. And I'll just read this passage again because it is so beautiful, and it's about our Lord Jesus. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. And his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end, upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. Isaiah 9, 6-7. Amen. Take care. I'll talk to you next time. Bye now.